The 4th of July 2010, Brownsburg, Indiana. It was a little after 11 p.m. I was sitting in my backyard, looking up to the sky to watch a few of the neighborhood fireworks. Then, at approximately 11:11, I saw the first one. Coming from the west, I saw a bright reddish-orange oval-shaped object flying in the sky. I would say it was pretty high up in the sky. It wasn't as if it were an object going up from the ground like a firework. There was a definite flight path. It was moving at a speed similar to what one would see if looking at a plane up in the sky. I saw it travel for at least 1 or 2 minutes, then it just disappeared. I called my husband out, he saw it too. About 3 minutes later, we saw another one, coming from the west, but not from the same point in the sky. We watched it travel for the same amount of time, then it, too, disappeared, but it disappeared in the same area in my vantage point as the previous one had. The third one appeared from a different direction of the west, more southwest, I would say, and it was so bright, I could see it coming toward us across the sky through the trees in my backyard. It too, headed in the same direction, west to northeast, and disappeared at about the same spot that the first two had. I went upstairs to grab my cell phone to see if my son had seen anything, and about 3 minutes in the phone call, I saw another one coming from the west, more north than the other three, and it also disappeared in the same area of the other three. These were not quick sightings. All four were visible for at least 1 or 2 minutes, if not longer. They looked like a bright reddish-orange color. Almost like the color of fire. Best description of the color I would say is, sometimes when the sun sets, it becomes a glowing, fiery color. They reminded me of fire, just by the color. The night was clear, so I could see there was no vapor trail. No smoke trail, nothing like that. I did notice the one that came overhead had no sound. These were not fireworks. They all four came from a different direction in the western sky. They were big enough for my husband and I to see them. And they all four went toward the same area in the sky and then completely just disappeared. When these ovals of fire disappeared, they became white first, then disappeared. When they did become white, it was as if they then in a way, began to look like a star, but not as bright. Then they just faded out. It was strange. I have never in my life seen anything like it. When I saw the first one, I knew there was something strange going on, and when I saw 3 more of them, I was completely amazed. Shocked in a way, to witness so many of them at one time. I kept wanting to see more and more, because I just could not believe what I was seeing. If not for my husband seeing them, also, I really don't know anyone would have believed me. With it being July 4th, people dismiss it as fireworks. Well, these ovals of fire that was traveling miles above the earth, were not fireworks. They came from different directions, disappeared in the same area. And honestly, one of my first thoughts was, what a perfect night for them to be out. With all the fireworks, they must have thought that they were blending right in. It only makes sense they would have picked last night to do a flyby.
The 17th of October 2010, Brownsburg, Indiana. It was exactly 1800 and I was outside talking to my son. He looked directly up in the air and said, "What the F is that?" I got off the porch and ran over to him. It was metallic in color and round in shape. It was at about 15,000 feet. Mind you, there were 2 other commercial planes in the air at the time. That was how I tried to judge the size and altitude. But just a guess since I had no idea the size of the craft, jet streams and all. One was to the northwest traveling west, the other was also west heading north. I only remember this because I noticed one had a jet stream that was dissipating quickly while the other was hanging around longer than normal. Anyway, as I look up, it was directly over my house heading south, towards Avon. This thing was moving rather quickly in a direct path but was zigzagging like a sailboat intact. The zigzags were slower in between zig and zag. Then it began to zigzag quicker. About 45 seconds it darted right then disappeared.
The 16th of November 2010, 11:30 p.m. I was driving to Avon to go to Walmart, and on US 36 I looked up over the lights of Avon, and there were 3 bright white lights, no flashing red or blue or green, just solid white moving to the right, and I asked my wife if she's seen them, and she said yes. 2 of them disappeared behind the trees, then the last one got brighter, then vanished, and that's the last I seen of them. My wife thought it was 3 planes, but I do not agree. They were moving too slow, as low as they were, and too close together. This experience was by far one of the creepiest I've seen.
Avon, Indiana. I looked up in the sky over my head one day in August 2007, and the sky was clear with large cumulus clouds. I spotted a contrail coming from a craft or UFO. The UFO was heading straight up at an angle to my left at about 11 o'clock. At the time I spotted it, it was probably under 20,000 feet altitude. It was a conical-shaped craft that was a little bigger than what you would see on the top of a Saturn V rocket. The shape was probably a little skinnier than the Saturn V module. The best way I can describe it is to say it was similar to the McDonnell Douglas Delta Clipper. It had a polished metallic appearance exterior, and the sunlight would flash off of its reflective skin as it moved. Its speed was not too fast or too slow, but about what you see commercial jets flying at. The contrail was a white continuous stream with clear and crisp white rings at a constant frequency, donuts on a rope. I saw these rings popping out of the exhaust of the UFO, and it was maybe one every 1 to 3 seconds. I'd say not too fast or too slow. The rings appear like actual rings, unlike some of the photos I've seen on the internet about this subject. I kept watching this craft as it increased in altitude to probably above 60k feet, where I couldn't see it anymore. Also, to the right I saw 2 other UFOs that were of the same shape and design, which were ascending at a similar speed to the first. They appeared to the upper right or at the 1 o'clock position of me, and these were at a lower altitude at first, staged lower from the first UFO. However, these 2, which looked like they were side by side, had no exhaust whatsoever that I could see. Again, I kept watch of these 2 UFOs until I could not see them as they disappeared into the upper atmosphere, traveling at a steep angle opposite of the first UFO.
Brownsburg, Indiana. In the pre-dawn morning of May 16, 1996, there were 2 other witnesses, and I have never reported this before, but now I may be dying, and want this told to someone, whether investigated or not. I was out on our brick patio behind the house, with a clear view of 200 degrees or so, from southeast, arcing through west, to northeast. The morning was clear, although there had been some clouds earlier, and before midnight on the 15th. I do not recall the phase or position of the moon. A flash of light to my left, roughly 220 degrees true. I am a retired submarine navigator, and position angle about 20. The object moved slowly and steadily toward the west, which was from my left to my right, as I had been facing west. I could not at that time judge distance or size, but if it had been a ship at sea, I'd have estimated its angle on the bow, based on its direction of travel, to be about starboard 10 to 20. There was nothing under it that I could see. From knowing this area, I know that at that time, the land in that direction was crop fields for corn and soya, early in the season for either. Since that time a few housing developments have been built. My first chance to get an idea of size and distance came after several minutes, when the object flew over the southern end of a long tree line, which ran south to north for about 1.5 miles. The tree line's closest point to my house is slightly under a mile, land measurements given here. Once over the tree line, I could confirm what before I had known might be an optical illusion. The course and speed of the object seemed steady, but it was definitely bobbing up and down. The tree line was very uniform in height, but the craft was bobbing below it and out of sight, and then well above it as it moved. At this point I called my 2 teenage children and was relieved that when I returned to the patio, the object was still there, moving exactly as before. We watched it until it passed out of our line of sight. I remained outside, and it returned 36 minutes later, reversing its previous path. I checked with the night editor of the Indianapolis Star to ascertain if anyone had reported anything unusual in the sky that night. He said that no one had and asked me what I had seen. I gave him a brief description, and then I asked him if he thought that it could possibly have been the Goodyear blimp, which was in the area to promote the upcoming Indianapolis 500, run on Memorial Day weekend. He said that it didn't sound like a blimp, and then he put me on hold and came back a minute or so later to tell me that the blimp was not aloft, anywhere, at that time. I thanked him and hung up, not leaving my phone number or name. The nearest I can come to comparing the object to anything familiar, would be to say that in light pattern, it somewhat resembled a police car's rooftop bank of lights, although the colors were not the same, and the size, which I estimate to be 500 plus feet from first light to last light. Most of the time I thought I could make out dark silhouettes beneath the lights, and above it, extending out from each end of the lights both fore and aft. This does not exclude, say, a saucer shape, or most shapes. This is merely the way it looked, as it bobbed up and down behind the tree line and then back again, as if on a rounded or straight course, but seeming always to be moving in roughly a straight line. But again, I cannot be certain of the silhouettes. Then seemed more evident as I looked away, of course, but the lights obscured any real chance for a good observation of the rest of the object.